Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Robbie, and this is The Unhinged Father. It's a podcast for normal folks looking for some humor, connection, relatability, or those who just like the sound of my sultry voice. A place where we can embrace aiming to be better people, but can accept that we will never get there. And that's okay. We're okay. I'm not some enlightened asshole here to tell you how amazing and perfect my life is, and then convince you to buy my how-to guide on how to make your shit not stink. I'm right here in the mud with you, working towards a better life, extending a hand out along the way. Now let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode. All right, everyone. Welcome to the show. Hope you're having a fantastic day, great week, good start to the year. Hope you're sticking to all your New Year's resolutions and that everything's going amazing for you. Got a little bit of a different type of episode for you today. Going to take you away from our normal dad-focused, parenting-focused content that I've really been kind of honing in on the last, I'd say, couple of months or so. But I do think that this episode is something that is going to be relevant to a lot of the listeners out there. If you are someone who has gone to college, if you're someone who is planning on going to college, if you're someone who's currently in college, or if you're a parent and you've got kids that may eventually go to college, I think that there's going to be some ideas within this episode that will be pertinent to you. So go ahead, give it a listen. If none of that sounds interesting to you at all, go ahead and just click it off right now. But before you do that, go and give me a 5-star review. Just kidding. You don't have to go and do that. You can click out now, though, if you don't want to listen about my thoughts about it's more so about college loans, student loans on the financial side, but also just my general thoughts on going to college. Fair disclosure, I am a college graduate. I went to the University of California, Santa Barbara, so I am a gaucho. And my story, just very briefly, because it's not really super important to the episode, is I went to UC Santa Barbara. I was the first kid within my family to really go to college. I did well within chemistry and math, and I was on the pre-med path in college. My parents wanted me to graduate early. We didn't really know, what it was going to be like, but I went in, got a bunch of AP credit, started off as a sophomore in terms of units, and really just burnt myself out so fast. Went in as a biochemistry major and made it through 2.5 years, fucking just crashed and burned. Lots of personal things going on. On top of that, I had just started drinking alcohol, as one does typically when they go to college. I didn't drink in high school. But yeah, I stopped doing biochemistry, stopped pursuing med school. I figured that if I wasn't going to be making it through college all the way, that I damn well didn't want to spend the rest of my life in school going to medical school. So dropped out of that. Had to figure out what degree I could finish within a year and a half. Sociology was it. And that was a cakewalk. I look back now with some regret on the fact that I wasn't able to get into a little bit more of a technical major, one that would be more useful in the job market and just in life in general. Although I did learn some good stuff within sociology, but that was more so on like the interpersonal skills, communication skills, writing, reading, all that good stuff. So anyways, that's just my story, but I wanted to jump in today on my thoughts on going to college and some of the big hot button topics that you hear today in society, in the news, all that stuff. And first off, I would say that I am, like most things, kind of in the middle on this. When you listen to it, either on CNN or Fox News or wherever the fuck you get your news from, podcasts, what you always hear people talk about, it's usually you have people bitching on both sides. You have one side that's just like, we need free education, we need to be given all of this stuff. And then you have the other side that's like, I'm not going to college. Why the fuck should I pay for other people to go as well? I'm not going to pay for them to go and do this stuff. But no one's really looking at, in my opinion, at the real causes of, I don't know if hardship's the right term, but some of the real fucked up things and predatory aspects of going to college. And that's what I wanted to dive in today and just kind of be like, no, these are the things that we should be focusing on. And if I had a duly appointed representative actually diving into what some of the issues are with going to college and getting student loans, these are the things that I would be looking into. And I'm going to break this down into 3 parts, and then I'm going to kind of do at the end a little story about my experience within college and some of the things that kind of led me towards that burnout, but there are some specific things that I think could be corrected within the education system. So the three things, first one is that despite popular opinion, I do not think that everyone should go to college. Do I think that there's a benefit to going to college, even if you don't get like a super technical degree in civil engineering or biochemistry or biology or mechanical engineering? Like, yeah, I think that there is a benefit to it, right? I was able to move away and learn a lot of the life skills that I needed to learn how to do my own laundry, how to manage a budget, how to sign up for classes, like have this responsibility placed on top of me. And then on top of that, when I did eventually move into the sociology realm of my major, I learned, reading, writing, communication skills. Like there's a lot of just generalized knowledge that I learned by going to college, but I don't think that everyone needs to go to college in order to gain those skills. And if you're going to get a degree in some random major like underwater basket weaving or some shit like that, it's really not going to be super applicable to you in the future. And maybe you do want to go do that. Maybe that's your passion. You can go to school, you can pursue that. And maybe the path forward is if it's one of these random, just purely academic majors or subjects, is that you continue on with your education. You continue on with education, master's, PhD, and then eventually teach or do research on that. But that's part of the problem, is that there's only so much research and work or teaching that can be done on these really niche, whatever the fuck you call it, subjects. And so you've got a bunch of people that are signing up and doing this work, but then there's not really work for them afterwards. So what do? They end up like me, and they end up in a fucking sales job. And you got another salesperson or a recruiter or some other thing that they didn't really go to school for. And then they're still paying off the debt that they incurred in order to go and get that education. And so I think that college can be an option for a lot of people, but I don't think that it's a necessity. Like a lot of people think that it should be required, or they think that they're better because they've gotten a college education. That's not true. You can learn these things outside of college. I have siblings that didn't go to college, and a lot of them make more money than I do. They went into a different industry. They stuck with that industry and they continued to work their way up. And that was something that they were able to do. Now, I was blessed because I was able to go to college, meet my wife, and have the family I have now. Every step that I've taken, there are certain regrets that I have within my life, but I don't truly regret it because every step that I took led me to where I'm at right now with two beautiful boys, my beautiful wife, and the life that I'm currently living. So I'm grateful for the fact that I got the opportunity to do that, but I don't think that it's this huge requirement, especially if we start going to this age of AI where a lot of these quote unquote technical jobs, coding and eventually customer service and things like this are going to be taken over by AI and artificial intelligence. If that ends up happening, there's going to be a huge demand more so on like the skilled labor side of things. There already is a huge demand on the skilled labor side of things. As a recruiter or someone who works within the skilled trades, I've already seen this demand and this lack of qualified people to go and do the work. And so that's a viable option for people out of high school. Go learn a trade, figure out how to do that. You can make a lot of money that way. You can have a really good life that way. And so it's just having this diversity of thought that college isn't the only way to go. So that's number one. Number two would be more so in terms of like the hot button topic right now, student loans, debt forgiveness, all that stuff. Do I think that the government should be paying or giving out loans to people to go to college? Maybe is probably the answer. I don't know if I would really give them that responsibility. But what's the bigger issue to me outside of the debate whether or not the Department of Education should be giving loans to citizens anyway, if they should be using tax money to give out loans to go to educational institutions, would be the fact that these loans are, in my opinion, fucking predatory. Some of the interest rates that luckily I've paid off my student loan debt, but my wife went to graduate school and became a professional, and she makes good money because of the profession that she went into. But we have these student loans that are as large as some mortgages. And the interest rates on some of these vary anywhere from like 7 to 11%. And it's just fucking ridiculous. And these aren't private loans that are being given out. These are government loans that have been given out to her that have these ridiculous interest rates associated with them. And on top of these huge interest rates is they do like income repayment plans, which help when you have such a huge amount of money that you're taking out and that you're getting a loan for. It helps to have these income driven repayment plans. But what they don't really go into, and this became a law for private companies, like private credit card companies a while ago. Private credit card companies cannot have your minimum payment be lower than the interest amount that you have to pay each month. So essentially, if you make the minimum payment on your credit cards each month, theoretically, you should pay it off eventually. Now, that's a good thing. That could end up taking you still years and years. You're going to pay a ton of interest on all that stuff. But eventually, if you keep on making that minimum payment, you will pay off those loans. With what I've been seeing, at least on my own, in our own personal situation, is that we get into these income-driven repayment plans and we're essentially just paying interest. And some of them, we're not making any dent on the principal. We're just paying interest, and the principal is growing because we're not paying the total amount of the interest being charged monthly for these loans. And so our principal continues to grow. The amount that we are owing is growing and growing. And so, we're 10, 15 years out of this now, and our principal is the same, but we've been, making $20,000, $30,000 worth of payments each year, and our principal is the same. It's fucking horseshit. And this is something that frustrates me, is that this is not what's being looked at. In my opinion, in this humble millennial dad's opinion, is that if the government is going to be giving out loans to students for educational purposes, the maximum interest amount on these loans should be the bare minimum to cover the administrative costs of whatever it is to give those loans out. 0.5, 1%, something like that, right? Giving student loans should not be a money-making opportunity for the government. It shouldn't be a chance for them to make a ton of money. And I know in reality, it probably isn't, because you have so many students who get these degrees in shit majors, and then they can't fucking pay them back, and they just default on their loans. And then it leaves the bill to all the people that actually make their payments, like my family, which fucking sucks. It's a broken system, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think that ideally, if you are going to be giving these loans out, make it a non-money-making venture for the government, where they're literally just lending the money out to go to these public institutions, these educational institutions, which is theoretically for the betterment of society. And so something that the government could have the right to do, and don't make it so hard to pay this stuff back. Because right now it seems like it's mostly like a predatory environment. And that brings me into like my third point on this, and these kind of blend in together, would be the fact that these publicly funded institutions are so fucking expensive to go to. They are so expensive. When I went to UC Santa Barbara back in the good old mid to late 2000s, I think my quarterly tuition was like $7,000. $7,000 a quarter was that. I don't even want to look to see what it is nowadays. But, when I came out of college, I think my total debt owed was like, and I was lucky, I had people help me pay, and I worked through college. So my total debt owed was like 10 or 11 grand or something like that. My wife was like 25 grand, which is not terrible for undergraduate, right? It's not like a graduate program, but to my understanding now, some of these loans, people are coming out of undergrad with loans of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, like just these massive, massive loans that are already getting them off on the wrong foot when they're starting. And my question would be, why is it that an institution that's already publicly funded or publicly subsidized in some way, shape, or form, why is it that those schools are so expensive to go to? It shouldn't be that way. And then you have almost like this weird incestual relationship between, like, the government's giving out these loans with 7 or 8, 10, 11% interest rates. They're giving out these loans like it's just free money. It's not. It's already our money. They're giving out money that the taxpayers are paying into. They're giving it to these students to go to these publicly funded institutions. So what the fuck do they care if they're increasing the price of going to a publicly funded institution? They're going to give that money out, and then they're going to be able to collect on the interest on that. And so you just have this like, sure, raise the prices of the publicly funded institution because we're going to give out this money. We're going to get that paid back there. It's essentially a tax on a tax on a tax, which is a lot of the shit that the government does a lot of times. And I'm not just don't want to sit here and talk about taxes and government spending and all of that stuff, but it is a huge issue, in my opinion, to have the same, I know that it's not like the same department, but it's the same government is responsible for not only lending and having setting the rates of the money that they're lending out for these institutions, but they're also in charge of the price of that institution. And in my opinion, if that was a private institution, there would be multiple laws that would be being broken, and the private side would be held to a higher standard almost than the government's holding itself. And so those are kind of the three things that I look at when I see this big issue of student loan debt and going to college and is it worth it and all that stuff. The three things, right? Not everyone should or needs to go to college. Number two, it's a predatory lending environment. I feel like the interest rates are super high. The government's handing out a shit ton of money, but they're charging a ton on the interest side, and you can make minimum payments and not be making any dent to your principal. And you just have these loans that you're paying for years and years and years, and it never really goes away. It's almost like you're just stuck for it for life. Like I'm going to be making this payment to the government for my entire life, which is taxes already. Like it's another tax essentially. And then third would be the fact that these publicly funded institutions are so fucking expensive when they're already getting money from taxpayers to subsidize their programs or to fund the institution. And that's going to take me into just kind of the last little story here. And I think one of the reasons why some of these publicly funded institutions can be expensive, but also just one of the reasons why people may not have the best experience when they go to these institutions. And that's the concept of the research professor versus someone who's just a professor. And I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not some school professional, but I can tell from what my experience is that usually the class that fucks people when they're going for med school or when they're going for one of these chemistry or biological majors is organic chemistry. Everyone hates organic chemistry. If you like organic chemistry, you're probably a serial killer. So for me, it was no different, right? I did all right. I started off kind of rocky with some of my higher level classes, just being a freshman coming in, but I got into organic chemistry. And in my school, there were two professors for organic chemistry. One of them was the person who wrote the fucking book that we used at the school to teach organic chemistry. She was a teacher, a real professor, someone who cared about the students that were in her class. And she had a very high pass rate for organic chemistry. I don't know much about it because I wasn't in her fucking class. And then you had another teacher who was a research professor who didn't give a shit about the pass rate in his class. He actually had a super low pass rate for his class. And I was one of the people who didn't make it past. I was one of the people who failed his fucking class. I can still remember taking the final exam, looking at it for 5 minutes, writing my name, turning it in, and fucking walking out and just being like, I give up. Because I didn't learn anything in his class. I didn't learn anything throughout the time. And I'm sure there were students who did pass that test. They were better students than me. They understood it better than me. That's not to say that there's not some responsibility on my own shoulders, but at the same time, we're paying these astronomical fees to go to school. Having a better teacher could have set me up to where I actually made it through organic chemistry, to where I would have actually learned these things, as opposed to be putting into a class where the guy basically just goes up to a chalkboard and starts writing shit and doesn't explain anything, and you don't know what the hell's going on. So for me, as someone who was working 2 jobs, didn't really have the time to go into all the, like my experience there was different than a lot of people. I had 2 jobs. I worked about 40 hours a week and was trying to go to school full time, which was difficult, was very hard. I didn't make it through, but that's this concept of having these research professors. One of the reasons why they're there is because they bring in money, grant money, and all this other shit for the university. And so the university doesn't just want them to do the research. They bring them on as a professor so that way they can, essentially pay them to come and do this research and to teach their students so they can charge their students for the classes that this person is teaching. But at the end of the day, not to say that every research professor is the same as this one, but their incentives are more so aligned with the research that they're doing as opposed to the students that are coming in to take their class or that they're teaching. So that's just something that I see as an additional problem and something that I struggled with when I went to school. I don't know if everyone has that same thing, but I think that that's probably something that's also an issue that needs to be talked about, something that needs to be addressed, and possibly something that's driving up the cost to go to these schools, bringing in big research professors, paying them big salaries, stuff like that. But that's for another conversation for a different time, potentially with someone who's an expert on this, because I am no expert. I'm just an armchair philosopher, millennial dad, your typical shithead who has lots of thoughts and opinions on a lot of different things. So yeah, I think that's gonna probably do it for this week's episode. Like I said, a little bit different from the normal stuff that I go into, but I do think that there's some ideas there that could be beneficial to parents who are going to have kids eventually, things to think about, things that might change the way that you perceive what your kids should do when they get a little bit older, or kind of ways to steer them. So that's it for today. If you've got any opinions or you think I'm wrong, you think I'm right, like I always say, click that little button, send me a message, let me know. And if there's anything that you would like me to talk about on this show, it doesn't always have to be related directly to parenting. That's where I'm at right now. I'm in the shit of it. I've got a 5.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so that's a lot of the things that I talk about is parenthood. And hopefully you like that stuff, but I'm more than happy to talk about things that are outside of the scope of just being a parent, because we're more than that. We're not just parents. But like I said, that's going to do it for today. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Have a good week, and I will see you next Wednesday. That's it for this week's episode. I appreciate y'all being here with me today. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasting needs met. If you feel the show deserves it, leave a 5-star review. It really helps. For more content, follow me on social media. As the show continues to evolve and grow, I have a big ask for all of my Unhinged fans. Each week, I'm going to ask you to share the episode with one person in your life that would relate to or benefit from the message. Click the share episode button and text it to them, email it to them, or send it through social media. Whatever you do, please help spread the word to others. Your support and endorsement is greatly appreciated. In the episode description, you'll find a send me a message button. Use it to suggest topics or share your thoughts on the episode. Just a heads up, I can't see who sent the message or respond in any way, shape, or form. So if you would like a response or you want to be a guest on the show, send me an email at unhinged.father@gmail.com. Thank you for your support. Have a fantastic day. And as always, be good, try hard, do your best.